The longest high school football rivalry in the state of Ohio had more than just tradition on the line tonight. Troy traveled the short distance to Piqua for a battle to decide the outright GWAC North Division champion. Let's head to Alexander Stadium, and here come the Indians. But it'll be a rough start for the home team.
Decide whether this ball game is going to be tied. The ball is snapped. It's a handoff to Honeycutt. Honeycutt scores for Piqua!
Our players have worked hard enough that we're in a position to be in a conversation, to be the league champs, and to go to the playoffs. So this game has a lot more meaning when it comes down to the final straw. It's just not just a regular game, a regular rivalry. These guys have worked hard. There's going to be a lot at stake.
Troy game personally means a lot to me. Knowing that it's the greatest rivalry in the state of Ohio, not a whole lot of schools get a chance to be in a quite big game as Piqua does.
It just means a lot to get that trophy back, hopefully make the playoffs and get a share of the GWAC North title.
Around here, it's like the Michigan-Ohio State game. You know, it's big. Everyone's watching it. Everyone's got a side. You know, whether you like the teams or not, it's just how it is. It's how it's played. And I'm excited for this Friday.
Troy Street ends here, and a new one begins.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Indian Nation Station pregame show here on the Indian Nation Station, Piqua Channel 5, your home for Piqua Athletics. Tonight we are in studio, not outside in the wet, cold, rainy drizzle. Dwayne Bachman would probably have icicles coming down from his nose. I'm AJ Ganger, Dwayne Bachman, Andrew Weaver again on the show this week as Bob Luby is in Nashville, Tennessee singing some country music. Tonight we've got the 134th meeting between the Troy Trojans and the Piqua Indians over at Alexander Stadium. Don't forget this game will be shown at 5:30 p.m. on Channel 5 Monday night. Guys, last game of the season, 134th meeting. Troy's coming in 8-1. Piqua's coming in 6-3. Wow, I mean, what a season, number one, for high school football.
Oh, I think it's been wonderful. Again, a little bit of surprising as we look at the GWAC, but generally speaking, I don't think we can complain about 6-3 from the Piqua side, although tonight's a big one. 7-3 would be a whole lot bigger.
Yeah, it would definitely be nice, yeah, be able to pull out a win against Troy. There's a couple players that we really need to watch out for against Troy, though, as JCP, their number one leading rusher in the GWAC, is insane.
Yeah, we'll go over his stats here as we go along in the pregame show. Again, scores from around week number 9, some big victories, some big upsets that went around last week in the GWAC. Springfield ended up beating Wayne 33-26. Fairborn got a win against West Carrollton by the score of 52-27. Xenia ended up beating Trotwood 29-28 in overtime, going for 2 points to pull off that victory. Just wow.
Well, I think one of the surprises this year has been Xenia. And again, we were talking that, boy, those guys surprised a lot of people. They surprised a lot of people at Trotwood Madison. I was glad to see it.
Andrew, what do you think about that Wayne 28-29, or excuse me, Xenia 28-29 win over Trotwood last week?
I am sad I did not look up the stats for that game.
You really wanted to look at those stats. Another one. I got to go over this because my prediction was completely wrong. Centerville gets their first win of the season, not against Beaver Creek, but against Fairmont, shutting them out 17-0. This is a good Fairmont team who, was having a great year. To get shut out by an 0-8 Centerville team? Come on, Dwayne.
Well, I would imagine they had a terrifically big crowd over there watching that one, because that is probably the biggest game of either one of those. And I was surprised simply because Centerville was 0-8, but by the same token, I was glad to see it. I always like to see the underdog win one once in a while. And again, the fact that Centerville was struggling so badly, you had to feel sorry for their fans, because I would imagine they were getting pretty restless.
And Andrew, we were messing around last week on the pregame show, sitting here talking about how, we were thinking that, Mr. Bachman was going to be in Centerville, and we hope not, because they were 0-8 and Centerville ended up pulling out the win.
One thing that I've been thinking about Centerville is, I just had a topic and I totally forgot what I was going to say.
That's all right. We'll come back to it. Here we go. A couple other ones here in the GWAC North. Troy beating Greenville 48-12, as well as Butler beating Sydney 27-6. And our game last week, Piqua winning on a 2-point conversion 14-13 in what was probably the best game of the season. And Mr. Bachman, you missed it.
And I was thinking about you. I was at a rehearsal dinner because my grandson got married the next day, and I couldn't wait for that dinner to be over so I could catch the radio for the last part of the game. We got a late start in the rehearsal itself. We got a late start for dinner, and by the time I got to the radio, it was almost 11:15. So I missed it all, but when I heard what happened, I thought to myself, I'll bet those guys went crazy in that press box. And I'm sure you did.
Yeah,
I would have too.
We
He
definitely
slammed his
did.
hand against the desk.
Yeah, I was getting frustrated at one point because Piqua fumbled that I hit my hand on the desk in a fit of rage for a few
I
seconds.
did end up calling that game though. I told
You
guys,
did.
Told
You
you guys
did.
we had to pass.
You know
We passed like
something,
13
AJ,
times.
about that game? I've known Coach Neese a long time. For the most part, a rather conservative type of guy. I was a little surprised at the 2-point conversion. I thought he was going to take the one and go into overtime and take his chance, especially with Micah Karn running the ball. I was a little surprised. That's a little out of character, but it ended up being the difference.
You know the way I look at that, obviously, let's go into the Piqua Tip City game from last week. The Indians needed 97 yards to cross the goal line to end up winning. A game that's dubbed The Drive by Rob Kaiser, the Piqua Daily Call sports editor. Micah Karn scored with just 9 seconds on the clock. And instead of going for the PAT, they ended up going for 2. It was senior night. The last time the Indians went for 2 at home, they ended up short against Sydney last season. And after a couple turnovers by Tip City, or timeouts by Tip City, I should say, the Indians lined up. Micah Karn found a lane on the right side and ended up crossing the goal line and give the Indians their 5th straight home victory and a chance at the playoffs. But, again, a lot of things are going to have to happen. Micah Karn was 7 of 12 for 112 yards, throwing the ball, 1 touchdown. He had 17 carries, 144 yards, and a touchdown. Jarrell Lewis was instrumental on the last drive of the game, had 7 carries for 40 yards. Owen Toops caught 4 of the 7 completions from Micah Karn for 79 yards and 1 touchdown. Matt Blankenship was just insane on the defensive side with 10 total tackles. Blaine Uhl had a fumble recovery. Brennan Toops also forced a fumble and had a fumble recovery. Karn had a game-sealing INT after going in for the 2-point conversion off a tip pass. Just a whale of a game for a senior on senior night. For Tip City, though, Piqua had a lot of trouble stopping the jet sweep. Josh Burrett, their wingback, had 22 carries for 200 yards and a touchdown. Cade Beam, the big fullback running up the middle, 20 carries, 66 yards and a touchdown. So we look at this game. You look at the total yards. You look at how many yards Piqua gave up on the ground. You think Piqua is getting blown out.
Well, again, I think, I've been around the block a few times, and one of the things that I remember in all the games that I called for Piqua is this. If the opposing team has one running back who is outstanding, but doesn't have a whole lot of help, Bill Neese will defend that person and he'll beat you. I don't know how many games we've seen where the opponent coming in with this hotshot guy who's going to go to Podunk University and Bill Neese shut him down and we win the game, sometimes rather handily. That is Bill Neese. He's a defensive genius, and if you come in with one running back, he'll beat you. You come in with 2 or 3, then it's a little different story.
And another thing we were talking about on the broadcast as well is that Tip City had 30 minutes time of possession opposed to just 17 minutes for Piqua. That game, we were almost done with that game by 9 o'clock on Friday night. Andrew, you're up in the booth watching this game, watching Piqua just get dominated on defense with the jet sweeps, but you're still thinking to yourself, there's still a chance that we have to win this game with all the turnovers. What were you thinking seeing Piqua giving up all those rushing yards by Josh Bird?
I was actually honestly surprised. Our defensive line has been really good this year, in my opinion. We have a big defensive lineman. Matt Blankenship, obviously, this is like his 3rd or 4th game with 10 or more tackles by himself.
Yes.
That's crazy. I don't know. That's something I was not expecting.
Yeah, I don't think anyone was expecting it either. Piqua did have 312 total yards. Tip City just 270. They only had 14 passing yards. Now, let's talk about the passing because that's what we know. Andrew wants to talk about. He's been chomping at the bit. Last week on the pregame show, he said Piqua needs to pass the ball more to end up winning this game. They only passed it for 12 times. One of them went for a touchdown, but 7 of 12 for Micah Karn. You said Micah has to pass the ball. He ran it less than 20 times. I guess you were right.
I said Micah had to throw for over 100 yards to win this game, and that helped us. It really did. It opened up our ground game for them to be able to run the ball. And you said something like later on that night that they didn't win on a pass play. That's technically not true in my opinion. You can say that running game is really what sealed the deal, but passing game is the only reason they were able to get the runs in.
Any final thoughts from you, Mr. Bachman?
Well, I think you're talking about the passing game, 7 for 12 for 112 yards. I don't know how that stacks up with all the other wins we've had, but I think that's a pretty good evening because Micah Karn is known for running the ball, not necessarily for passing the ball. And when you're 7 for 12, you've had a pretty good evening on both occasions, whether you're running it or whether you're passing it. And when you're passing the ball 7 for 12, you're keeping that defense far much on their toes than if you're just running it.
I agree with all you
Wonder
guys.
why Tip lost.
Why'd Tip lose?
They only had 14 passing yards.
All right, now that we are done with the Piqua Tip City game, let's move on to Division III Region 12 rankings at this time. We got Alter at 1, Walpock at 2, Bishop Fenwick at 3. Butler has clinched, according to Mr. Bachman's notes, at 6 and 3 at number 4. You look at CJ at 5, Baden at 6, Trotwood at 7, Mount Healthy at 8. Piqua right now, we're on the outside looking in at number 9. Need a lot of help tonight, including a huge win over the rival Trojans. And number 10, Franklin. What do we have to do, Mr. Bachman? You've got who plays who, where, and when for the Indians to end up getting into the playoffs tonight.
Well, again, we've got 4 places that are already clinched. That means we're vying for the other 4. Alter, number 1, plays Carroll. Alter 8-1, they're going to make it, obviously. Carroll is not clinched. They're 7 and 2. If Carroll loses, they might drop out of that spot, and that would help Piqua. But a CJ win, of course, is going to vault them into number 1. Walpock plays St. Mary's. Doesn't make any difference. Walpock's in regardless. St. Mary's is 9-0. They'll probably be in as well. This the one that I like is Bishop Fenwick. They're 7-2 playing Carroll, and it would appear to me that Bishop Fenwick loses, Carroll wins. Could that influence a little bit with Bishop Fenwick? Not at all. They're a clinch, but nonetheless, Carroll keeps peaking up in all of these games, and they're 12th this past week. If they beat Alter, they'll be in the playoffs. But when you're 12, you got to win.
Yeah.
You can't lose and move up that fast.
Yeah.
Butler, again, I told you I was a little surprised that they are clinching, and if they get beat by Tip City tonight, they're going to be 6 and 4. But that's what Joe Itel has on his computer. So obviously Butler's in. They must have had a couple wins that got them a few more points than perhaps Piqua, even though the records are the same. CJ, of course, we talked about them. Their quarterback played the first 5 games because of the eligibility situation. They struggled a little bit. I would not necessarily pick CJ to beat Alter tonight. Baden, there's Hamilton Baden. They're 6'3". They're 6-3, playing McNicholas 1-8. It would appear to me that if Baden wins, they're a lock on one of those spots. If they lose, that could change things considerably. Trotwood Madison, and Joe Eitel says you control your own destiny. I always thought that meant you probably had to win to make the playoffs, and that's what they've got with TM against Wayne, and I'm not so sure Trotwood Madison can beat Wayne. And if they can't, they might drop down a little bit and help us. And of course, the number 8 one, that's got me completely puzzled. Number 8, Mount Healthy, is 5-4 against Edgewood, 7-2. It would appear to me that if Mount Healthy gets beat by Edgewood, and with Edgewood being 7-2, that could easily happen. Could that also impact number 1 through 8 somewhere along the line and help the Piqua Indians? That's the way it looks to me. There's still some things that can happen. Might have to take something very special.
Yeah, I agree. And again, if, I'm looking at it this way. Trotwood is going to have a tough time winning the game tonight.
Right.
Mount Healthy, a tough time winning the game. CJ and Alter, they're both in the playoffs, but if CJ, we lost to CJ, so we may end up having a good shot here. I don't know. I really think we have a shot, but it all starts with us winning against Troy tonight. Andrew?
Well, you know what I'm going to say about us winning against Troy?
What?
We have to have a good pass game today.
Yeah, we really, really do. When you look at the type of defense Troy runs, we weren't able to get that passing game really clicking. Yeah, we were 7-12 last week against Tip City. We're going to see a similar defense. We'll talk more about that before our game here tonight. We're going to see a similar defense in Troy this week as we did Tip City last week. But going into the night's game, obviously the Indians are going to have to get the passing game going.
AJ, what are you hearing on defensively for Troy against the pass? Have you talked to anybody who indicates they might be a little vulnerable on that side of the ball?
They are a little bit vulnerable in the passing game when you look at it. They run a 50 cover defense, same defense as Tip City, where you got 5 to 7 guys in the box. You can rush at any time. You're leaving your corners and your safeties on an island most times. If you bring pressure, your safeties and your corners are going to be obviously in trouble. You look at some other college teams. A lot of college teams nowadays like the blitz. What does that do? You better have some good corners because you're leaving your corners on an island. If Troy, I don't think, has the good enough corners to cover some of these Piqua receivers like Owen Toops and maybe Colin Rowe if you throw him out there.
And again, I'm sure Coach Verbacher from Troy has looked at the film from the Piqua game last Friday, and he's probably very, very much aware that Piqua's passing game could be a big factor.
Yeah.
And I imagine they've made some adjustments. If not, then he's taking his chance of what got him 8-1, and hopefully it isn't going to be enough.
I agree. All right, let's move in now. Games around the GWalk final week of the regular season as we got Butler at Tip City tonight, Sydney against Greenville, Xenia against Fairborn, Trotwood against Wayne, obviously probably one of your GWalk game of the weeks, West Carrollton against Stebbins, Springfield against Fairmont, Centerville and Beaver Creek. No matter that they're both 1-8, it's going to be a good game. Northmont against Miamisburg, that is going to be a huge game. I believe that's going to actually decide a conference championship. Lebanon against Springboro, and obviously Piqua against Troy tonight, which we're about to get into here in a few minutes. Guys, what are some of the big games in the GWalk Week 10 this week you're looking forward to?
Well, I think you picked it out. I think it's going to be Northmont versus Miamisburg. Again, if I'm not mistaken, Miamisburg's the only team that beat Troy.
Miamisburg is the only team that's beaten Troy.
And I'm glad to see that, again, only because Miamisburg has not been strong over the years. So I'm kind of glad to see them doing well. As I look at that listing, that's the only one that really catches my attention. I'm always interested in the other side of the ledger. West Carrollton and Stebbins, 1-8 and 0-9. I would imagine with the rain we're having, that's a good reason not to come out to the stadium.
Yeah, especially for a game like that. You talk about Northmont, Miamisburg. Talk about Miamisburg being the only team that's beaten Troy. This has happened a few times over the years where Miamisburg, no matter what kind of team they are, they always seem to get Troy. I think they got Troy last year, they got Troy this year, so it's just a matter of, who you playing.
Well, there are times, and you know as well as I do, there are times when certain schools seem to play well against another school and don't play worth a hoot any other time during the season. That's why Greenville scared me, because Greenville in the past has always been tough on Piqua in football. They weren't this year, but that's why it scared me. Traditionally, they've been pretty tough against us in football.
Andrew, what game are you looking forward to here in the GWalk Week 10?
Butler against Tip City.
Why are you looking forward to that game?
Obviously, we've seen how Tip City can play, and I think they're underrated for where they sit in the standings at 4 and 5. They're definitely a tough team. They have a running game, which is pretty much what almost lost us the game. Their defense pretty much stepped it up. I think that's going to be a close game. If not, I think Tip will end up winning. Just bold prediction.
I like your prediction. That's actually a really bold prediction, bold statement there to say Tip City will beat Butler tonight. It's possible. It could happen to anybody at any time.
That wouldn't be the biggest surprise of the season in my estimation.
No, not in the season.
Because I think, and again, I wasn't at the game, but from what I was told, they're not too bad a ball club.
No.
Vandalia Butler is also good. I tend to think that might be one of the closest games on the schedule.
Yeah, I agree. That's going to be a really close game, come down to the wire. Let's go ahead and look at the GWalk American North standings. We are in kind of a pickle right now when you look at the top of it. Tonight, Troy can win the GWalk North outright with a win over Piqua as they sit up top 4-0 and 8-1 overall. But if Butler is to win and Piqua is to win tonight, we got a three-way share of the GWalk North American North title. If Butler loses and Piqua wins, Piqua is still going to share that title with Troy, unfortunately. But the best that Piqua can do is win a share of the GWalk American North title, which still is awesome coming into a game that's seen these types of games over the years where it comes down to the conference championship. The last game of the season, I mean, you're playing for a conference championship tonight.
Any way you look at it, this is for the big trophy. One of the things I did over the week was take a look at common opponents. And, of course, Piqua and Troy both have 4 common opponents. And obviously, that was easy to figure out. The thing that I looked at were number of points scored and number of points given up. As I looked at those 4 games, I thought that if there was an edge, I think Troy scored more points than Piqua, but by the same token, Piqua gave up fewer points on the defensive side than Troy did. Whether that's going to equal itself out, I don't know. I think the key tonight for Piqua is going to be whether or not we can keep them to a low-scoring game. If it's a 50-48 game, I think we're in trouble. I don't think we're capable of scoring that many points. 3 of our wins, Sydney, Vandalia, Butler, and Tip City, we've never scored more than 25 in any of those 3 games. To think we can score 50 against this Troy bunch might not be realistic.
Andrew?
Well, the only way we're going to win is if we stop their 2 main offensive threats, and JCP and Brandon Silly. And I don't know if we can. Our defense is really going to have a tough game today. As we were talking about, JCP is number 1 in GWalk. He has like 1,700 yards. 1,700 yards. He sits like 500 yards over the second leading rusher in the GWalk, and 500 yards. That's just insane. Not on top of that, he averages around like 9 yards per carry.
Yeah, that's complete. And you look at last week. Let's get into this. Tonight, it's the Battle of Miami. Piqua versus Troy for the 134th time. It's not the oldest rivalry in the state of Ohio, but no 2 teams have played more than Piqua and Troy. Troy's coming off their 8th win of the season, where they were running through the competition all season long. Running back Jaden Colt Bishop is coming off a 28-carry, 399-yard, 6-touchdown game against Greenville. He's leading the entire GWalk in rushing, just like Andrew said, with 1,739 yards, 28 touchdowns this season. The guy in second place has 1,200 yards rushing. For Piqua, senior Micah Karn has 1,726 total yards altogether. 21 total touchdowns, 15 of them rushing, 6 of them passing. He's been the man to step up, really, when the Indians needed to make a big play. He scored the game-winning touchdown against Sydney, game-winning touchdown and game-winning 2-point conversion last week against Tip City. He's been the man that stepped up all season long. Again, tonight's the 134th meeting between Piqua and Troy. Troy leading the all-time series 64, 63, and 6. Piqua's looking for revenge this season, looking to go 6-0 at Alexander Stadium. Guys, our first Piqua Troy game on the Indian Nation Station. I'm getting chills getting ready for this game.
Well,
what are the Indians going to have to do tonight to obviously even this series back up?
Well, it's going to come down to defense without a doubt. And remember I said earlier when Piqua has had to face a running back who was outstanding, and obviously Jaden Cole Bishop is that. If they can hold him to 150 yards, I think they got a chance of winning.
Just 150.
Can they do that? Can they do that is the real question. I think turnovers, penalties, and again, I hate to say it, but it looks to me like the extra point game has been important this year. More important than I think I've ever remembered it being as long as I've been around the block. And so it might be the little things. Certainly with the weather being what it is, fumbles could be a problem. Of course, it could happen either way.
Andrew, we talk about fumbles, and last week, obviously, you were just saying I got a little frustrated calling the game because we fumbled the ball a few times, especially one on a drive that we almost got points on. What are your thoughts opposed to the fumble? Obviously, tonight it's going to be raining and cold just like it was last week. What are we going to have to do to keep a hold of the ball tonight?
Well, obviously, when you're down there playing on the field and you have the ball, you always want to keep it like tucked in close to you.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the guys from last week were trying to switch hands, and if you notice, Micah, I think one of his fumbles, he was trying to switch hands so that he could get the ball away from the defender, so it wasn't a stripped. He's just, they're just gonna have to not try to get as crafty as they want to. They're gonna just have to try to bully their way through and keep the ball tucked in tight.
I agree. They're going to really have to hold on to the ball. The balls are going to have to be pretty dry here tonight. Have multiple balls on the sideline, ready to go at any time. One thing I think that the Indians are going to have to do, they're going to have to get their defense off the field. You cannot have long drives. I mean, I think Tip City last week had a 15-play drive that ended up scoring points that lasted 7 minutes. Your defense cannot be on the field for more than 7 minutes at a time. You're really going to have to need them to get off the field. And your offense is going to have to put points on the board. You can't go 3 and out. They had some big key 3 and outs last week and turnovers that I thought was going to end up costing them the game, and it didn't, thank God, because our defense stepped up and win that game. Tonight, got to get your defense off the field, and you got to put points on the board, because if you don't, this is going to be getting ugly pretty quickly.
Piqua's got a better chance in a low-scoring game than they do in a shootout.
They really do. You do not want to play shootout against Troy tonight. Well, guys, I think that's all the time we have for tonight here on the Indian Nation Station pregame show, Piqua Channel 5, your home for Piqua Athletics. Stay tuned for the game coming up next here on the Indian Nation Station. It's the 134th meeting between the Piqua Indians and the Troy Trojans. We've had a great season, and for the last time this year, that's Dwayne Bachman, that's Andrew Weaver. I'm AJ Ganger saying good night and go Indians.